Hello, YouTube. This is Mike, and I wanted to respond to a couple of comments on the channel, and we're going to ask the question: Is Quiet BPD, Quiet Borderline Personality Disorder, is that the kinder, gentler version of BPD, or is it, in fact, perhaps a little more insidious, maybe even a little more deceptive than loud borderline personality disorder? Is there even a difference? I'm going to share my thoughts and my experience with that. Um, Now, since I cleaned out some of the cobwebs in my last video, uh, there has been some great responses from people with borderline personality disorder. So, for any borderlines who come onto my channel, and understandably, let's be clear, I understand why they do it. They want to come onto my channel and attack me and accuse me of stigmatizing them and calling them evil, and which of course I've never done. Um, Now let's hear from some actual borderlines in recovery. Let's be clear. I have not made this channel in any way to attract, help, or address borderlines. This channel is here for one reason, and that is to help partners of people who suffer from undiagnosed, untreated, and/or toxic borderline personality disorder. Because in my experience, the partners of these people are underrepresented, and there's no clear path for recovery. In fact, it's not even acknowledged that there is a need for people in this category to recover. You know, you either have uh, channels out there made by psychologists who sort of talk around BPD. There are the people who have BPD who have their own channels, which is great for other people with BPD to go and connect with them. And then you have all the super empath channels where you have people, some of them are, psychologists, licensed working psychologists who are so incredibly chronically codependent. And then you just have the super empath channels where we talk about how to destroy the narcissist and all this sort of nonsense, which is really just, we're talking again, just chronic, untreated codependence, toxic codependence, bordering on narcissism and borderline themselves. So this is a place for people who have been in a relationship with borderlines and you are suffering. My experience is, if you have been in a relationship with a borderline for any length of time, especially if you've been in there long enough to be devalued and or discarded and then hoovered back in, and that can, there can be a micro split or a micro whatever. And that's happened to you at least once and you've stuck around, you've been infected. And that infection gets in there and it starts to turn you into a borderline. And in my experience, people who've been in relationships for any length of time, sometimes for years, it can take decades and they're still not healed. So this channel, before we get into examining what quiet borderline personality disorder is, and I share with you what some borderlines in recovery are saying about my channel, I first have to tell you that you must be reminded on what the title of this channel is. The title of this channel is not, let's talk about how horrible the borderline is. Let's talk about how much I'm in pain and how I can't get over it. That's not the title of this channel. The title of this channel is The 4 Things That Heal BPD and NPD Abuse. If you do not do these 4 things, in my experience, there's a good chance that you will not achieve complete recovery or any recovery at all. In some cases, you will stay in a state of chronic PTSD and you will be in pain. You will be pining over them. You will be full of rage, wanting to get revenge, etc., which means that you're still infected and the infection has not gone away. So those four things are: number one, you go complete no contact, which means that you make it impossible for them to ever contact you again. If you don't do that, you haven't gone no contact, no excuses. You're married? Okay. Get a divorce and get a lawyer. Have the lawyer do all of the contacting for you. You have kids? Great. Talk to the lawyer. The lawyer does all the negotiating for you and is the go-between. You never have to talk to the wife or the husband ever again. They know where you live. Oh, okay, great, move. But they have your number. Great. Throw your phone in the river, get a new phone. It means that you do whatever it takes. You're not willing to do that, you're not willing to heal, in my experience. So number one is you go complete no contact. Number two, you work all 12 steps of Codependence Anonymous. Truth is, I don't care which anonymous program you want to go in, but if you're on here, you're a codependent, so you can start there. CODA.org. I didn't say go to meetings and like it. I said work all 12 steps with a sponsor, then sponsor somebody else. Those first two things are non-negotiable. You don't do those things, in my experience, you won't completely heal from the relationship. Number three is to work with a psychologist. You don't have the money, fine, wait a little bit. As long as you're doing 1 and 2, you're in the healing process. 3 can come later when you can afford it. Number 4, do some kind of daily meditative practice, which is really just step 11. So really what we're saying is you have to do steps 1 and 2 thoroughly and completely with everything you have. Otherwise, in my experience, this is an infection that does not go away. Having said that, now let's take a look at the subject at hand, which is: are quiet borderlines the kinder, gentler borderline? I've heard numerous times people who self-identify as quiet borderlines, and to be clear, I was dating somebody who fell within that category, so I have personal experience with it. But I've seen people on here and in other places who identify as quiet borderlines say that I don't lash out at the other person, I take it out on myself. So the problem is that I hold it in, I take it out on myself, and so some have said, I'm not one of those people. I'm just, I hurt myself, not others. And then there are some that don't say that, but they say something that might be interpreted that way. And so let's take a look at it. There's I'll get to some at least one other borderline comment, which is pro this channel. But let's take a look at this. So this individual, by the way, it is not my intention to call anybody out, especially this person, or make them feel bad in any way, because clearly this person seems to be doing everything in their power to heal. And let me be clear, I do not know what borderlines need to do to heal. I don't know. I'm not a borderline. I've got my own, codependence and my own other issues that I continue to seek therapy for from a therapist. But I can't tell you what you need to do if you have this disorder. Based on what I've seen, my experience of what I've seen that seems to work really well, at least in one instance, is doing DBT therapy regularly, like you're seeing a therapist on a regular basis, like once a week, something like that. You're also going to group therapy, like once a month or more. And you're doing the DBT, I think there's like a little workbook where at home every day, you've got a little workbook where you do these exercises. That seemed to me like a very good way to help borderlines. I tell codependents that don't have a disorder that they need to go to some kind of 12-step work and work the 12 steps with a sponsor. I think the 12 steps can help anybody. I honestly don't know if the 12 steps have the same curative power for BPD. My feeling is that it doesn't have the same, but it can't hurt. When I read this comment, you'll know why I've said that. All right, so this person says, I'm a young man with quiet BPD. So, in case you don't know what quiet BPD is, it is borderline personality disorder, and it's really the way that they express their symptoms. So, it means that when they split, when they devalue, their attempt is to shove it all inside, to hold it inside, and to whatever that means for them. I believe that the strategy on their part is that they don't want to hurt other people. So I believe that they honestly think that they're not causing harm to other people. Here's the problem. If you have this disorder, unless you've been in therapy for a long period of time and had success with that therapy, you are still damaging people. There's no difference. So this goes to the question, is quiet BPD a kinder, gentler form? Does it cause less damage? No. Well, I didn't yell and scream and slash your tires, and I didn't throw things at the wall or physically attack you. Well, that's obviously a good thing, but the symptoms of borderline personality disorder that are so destructive are not the emotional dysregulation. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing fun about that. But while emotional dysregulation is a problem, that is not unique to borderline personality disorder. There's a lot of people even without personality disorders that have emotional dysregulation. So that's not it. So emotional dysregulation isn't the biggest problem. The thing that makes borderline personality disorder so incredibly destructive, not only to the borderline, but to other people, is the splitting. So splitting, let's be clear, these are symptoms. And if you don't have these symptoms, you don't have BPD. Period. End of story. So you can't come on here, and I'm not attacking this person, I'm just saying in general. You can't come on here and say that you have BPD, but how dare I make all of these generalizations because everybody is different. That's true. Everybody is different. But the generalizations that allow you to be diagnosed with BPD are you split. And splitting means that when you become stimulated in your fear of abandonment, it can also stimulate fear of engulfment. And what happens when you go through the fear of engulfment, the fear of enmeshment becomes too intense. You then lash out and destroy the relationship. Now, what does that look like? If you're a loud borderline, that can be yelling, screaming, starting arguments, setting fire to the house, some really horrible, loud way of expressing your desire to destroy the relationship at all costs. You will devalue the other person by literally devaluing them, saying how horrible they are the worst person that's ever existed, and I wish that you would eat dog feces for the rest of your life, and just the worst possible horrific, angry things that anybody could ever say. And if you have quiet BPD, you can say, well, I don't do that. So you see, I'm not that kind. You can't say these things about me because I don't do that. Well, but quiet borderline personality disorder comes out in all kinds of ways. You can ghost. You think you just disappear. I'm not going to get angry at them, so I'll just disappear for weeks at a time. In my case, my borderline would do things like overdose on anxiety medication and be incapable of getting out of bed for weeks at a time. Or she would take anxiety medication, and then I'd get these phone calls where, the medication is messing with her BPD to such a point where she's, saying, I'm going crazy, I'm insane, I'm seeing things, there's something, and then I would try and go take care of her. And by the time I showed up, she'd be zonked out and, dead, OD'd on some medication. The quiet borderline, in my experience, was, kind of notorious at going in and out of different facades. So, one day she'd be one person, and then the next day she'd be a completely different person. Almost like she had multiple personalities. They weren't, they were facades. But so ghosting, taking off, you still cheat, you just don't yell about it. The symptoms are exactly the same, and they have the exact same effect on the partner. So just because you're not doing it loud doesn't mean it doesn't have the exact same destructive, horrifically destructive effects. My borderline, when she would discard me, she would do things like, it would be right after, of course, we had the most beautiful, deeply, connecting experience that we've ever had, and we're going to live together forever and change the world, and oh my God, I love you so much. She'd be telling me how wonderful and perfect I was. She would find ways to communicate with me and bring out all of my deepest feelings. In fact, get me to cry about what my mom did to me, and then she would say, I'm going to fix that, and create this feeling of trust, create this feeling of safety. And then the next day, I'd get a text, a phone call, saying how I just can't be with you. What? Why? Well, I had a bad dream last night, and I just know that I can't trust you, and you're not healthy for me. What did I do? Listen, I can't talk anymore. I have to go. Click, and then I'm blocked. That's a quiet borderline thing to do. That's them saying, I'm just taking care of myself, and this isn't about you. I didn't hurt you. When she actually did do the final discard, same thing. I mean, I've shared about it before, but it was a really deliberate attempt to seduce me in. Now, she believed everything she was saying when she did it, but to seduce me in at my most vulnerable. And then the next day, Christmas Day, thank you very much. Then I get a phone call, and she's like, we have to talk. And I'm like, oh, really? She's like, yeah. And then she says, I spent hours last night writing this out. And she starts reading from this note, devaluing me in a very quiet way. I can't be with you anymore. You said this one word when we were talking last night, and I don't blah, 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 and you're destroying my ability to live my life, and so you can understand. And then, of course, I got very upset. She's like, oh my God, you're so dramatic. I'm like, what are you talking about? You just eviscerated me. Oh my God, you're so dramatic. I mean, I spent all night writing this note. And I'm like, so because you spent a long time writing a note, accusing me of things that I've never done or thought, devaluing and destroying me, and destroying this relationship, breaking every single promise that you made to me, because you spent all night writing that in a note, and because you're composed right now that somehow you're not completely destroying me? So that's quiet borderline personality disorder. It still is the same thing. They go from loving you to hating you. They go from idealizing you to devaluing you. They ghost, they disappear. Devaluation is devaluation, whether you're doing it with a smile on your face or whether you're doing it with a red face full of anger. It doesn't matter. It's the same. It has the same exact destructive effect. And in fact, it might even be worse. In my case, that's the truth. Looking back on it, I think there was a woman that I dated a long time ago who may have had loud BPD, and that's easier for me to deal with because I'm the kind of, alpha male tough guy. The last thing you want to do is get in my face and yell at me because then I get angry, and when I get angry, then I am able to defend my boundaries really well. Don't get me wrong, I don't get physical. But, I remember dating her and, her doing that weird thing and her getting in my face and yelling at me so loud that my hair was blown back. Yes, I had hair at one point. And, that's easy to deal with. You got a borderline that's screaming and yelling at you. It's like, you know what? You're nuts. I'm out of here. That's a lot easier for me to deal with. Some people that doesn't. That works. That makes them wilt and then they become really passive. That's not how I function. But the quiet ones, those are the really tough ones for me to deal with because I'm a problem solver, i.e. codependent, which means that when they come to me after having written a note, it makes me want to solve the problem. And but so the point is, it doesn't matter. This term quiet, meaningless. It's just the way that you express your extremely destructive symptoms. They're horrifically destructive. And until, you've been that person on the other end of a borderline, and borderlines, if you go out and date another borderline, then you understand. I've seen a few borderlines come back on here and say, I've now dated a borderline and I know exactly what you're talking about. Thank you. You're not going to know it until you've been on the other side. And the whole point, as somebody's going to say here, is that it's that borderlines aren't aware. It's not that they choose to be this way. It's not that they wake up, trying to be evil, destructive people. They have a disorder, which means that they have a psychosis which doesn't allow them the ability to see objective reality. Neurosis, if you're a codependent, you're neurotic. You see objective reality, you just don't like it. That's why you're able to be hoovered back in. I wasn't hoovered back into the first borderline that I dated years ago that I didn't know anything about BPD because she wasn't quiet. She yelled and screamed, physically assaulted me, and you don't do that to me. You put your hands on me in a violent way, and that's it. I'm not ever going to touch you or be around you or see you or talk to you ever again. That's it, end of story. So that was easy. But when I've got a quiet borderline, devastating me and destroying me, because I was codependent, neurotic. I was trying to deny myself what the reality is, which is that this person is not in the same level of reality that I am, and that they will harm you, that you cannot believe what they say. Because I was neurotic, I wanted to believe her when she came back and said, you know what? And then whatever they do to hoover you back. That's neurosis. Because reality has already been shown you. If they discard you, even once, the devaluation is so out of the ordinary. So here's another thing, BPDs. Again, my borderline did this same thing. And I said to her something like, you've broken up with me like 8 times in the past 4 months. And she's like, yeah, so what? It happens all the time. It happens every day. People break up with each other all the time. Yeah, but they don't do that. The devaluation that happens and then the hoovering, that doesn't happen in non-BPD relationships or narcissistic relationships. So just breaking up with somebody is not the same as completely devaluing and destroying them. And so, borderlines just don't know. They don't understand. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I've gotten into that. I'm not going to get into that now. So let's see if I can get through some of this person's comment. It's a long comment. I won't read the whole thing. But this person says, I'm a young man with Quiet Bpd. I was intrigued by your videos. I'm going for my master's and PsyD in psych. I think that's Doctor of Psychology in psych, because that's the only way I can really process emotions and understand myself. So let me stop there for a second. As I said, I don't know what borderlines need to do to recover, but I don't believe that studying psychology is an effective form of therapy for oneself. Um, I don't know. I don't know if you are working with a psychologist who knows that you are borderline, because there are lots of borderlines that, my borderline was unable to function. She had so many other comorbidities going on that she wasn't able to function in society, as I found out later. But some borderlines are perfectly capable. They're actually able to go to school, do very well in school, able to have jobs and become therapists and be very successful. And no doubt in my mind, a borderline can make an amazing therapist. There's a difference between, telling somebody in therapy and then living it. A perfect example is Sam Vaknin. Brilliant therapist, brilliant intellectual, one of the greatest intellectual minds of our time. An amazing person if you want to have somebody really explain the nuts and bolts of borderline and narcissism. But based on the film that was made of him, long after he was made self-aware of his narcissism, and long after he became a psychologist, you see him in action, and he has, if that film is any indication, he has zero recovery. He's still horrifically abusive, psychopathically abusive, at least to that person that he did in that film. And I saw that and I went, oh, holy crap. So just because you're going to school and getting your doctor of psychology, that isn't going to necessarily give you any recovery. I could be wrong. It certainly isn't going to hurt, but it's not the same as actually being in therapy. It's not the same at all. So he says, that's the only way I can really process emotions and understand myself. Maybe that's true, maybe that's not. I have my doubts. He says, and I'm always interested to hear other perspectives. That's a good sign. He says, for the vast majority of BPD, you really hit the nail on the head. And I resonated with all of it because I'm either that way or used to be that way. Now, here's where I'll just read it and then I'll tell you my thoughts. He says, however, my girlfriend of 2 years and I are breaking up because our careers are calling us to different places. This is definitely one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. But if this means she will be happy and successful in her career and fulfilled in life, it's worth it. Now, what's missing for me is that there's no vulnerability. Other than you said it's one of the hardest things you've ever had to do, but you haven't revealed anything about what's happening. You're making it sound like a weather event. In other words, you're making it sound like something, is happening to you that both of you have no control over, and I don't know what that means. Calling you to different places. Does that mean she's going to go and live in Brazil and you're going to live in China because of career? And the only reason you're breaking up is because your careers are taking you to two different places on the globe? Does it mean that you are going to be in different places emotionally, or that your careers are going to be different even though you could still work together? What's not in here is how you guys are breaking up. Are you breaking up because she came to you and said, I can't do this anymore? You wanted to stay with her, but she's leaving you? Is it the other way around? Are you justifying perhaps you're leaving her? Maybe you're going to discard her, and this would be a very borderline way of doing it, a perfectly quiet BPD way of doing it. So our careers are taking us in two different directions, and I just won't be successful in mine because of yours. Your career gets in the way of me doing my career, which is a very BPD way of devaluing somebody. A superficial reason to justify your desire to escape the intimacy. Because as we know, borderlines ultimately, their fear of abandonment and their devaluation and discarding is because of their inability to tolerate real intimacy, lasting intimacy. They can't tolerate it. So they destroy. So is this you destroying the relationship and you've got a perfect justification? Have you destroyed another human being, but you've laid out these logical things of, well, we can't. I mean, your career and mine, they're just not going to mesh. And, so we have to go our separate ways. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done, but if it's going to be the best thing for you, or is that you saying, because she said, listen, the best thing for me is I just can't be with you anymore. And she's giving you an excuse when in reality she can't tolerate the pendulum swing. That's what's missing for me. There's no real details. You're saying it in the third person as though God is doing it to you. And so that has me wondering. Because quiet borderlines, especially quiet borderlines, this is, by the way, let me just be clear. I'm not criticizing at all your choice to become a psychologist. I think please enjoy it. I think that can only help you. It's not going to hurt you. But this is exactly what a quiet borderline might do. It is a great way of justifying to oneself that I'm making progress when all that's happening is that you're empowering your quiet borderline ability to read people. And so there is, a narcissistic payoff at going in and having a client there and being able to use your hyper ability to read people's emotions and get deep inside their emotions and pull their emotions out, which psychologist has to do, which may be really helpful to them as long as you're in a professional setting. There's no way that's not going to help them. And I'm thinking of one self-admitted borderline who is a professional counselor, and I have no doubt she's good at what she does. But I also have no doubt that based on personal experience, this is somebody that is still extremely toxic and extremely narcissistic and destructive. So point being, I'm not going to completely co-sign that justification that going for your doctor of psychology because that's the only way you can really process emotions and understand yourself, because that's not how recovery works. How recovery works is that you are with a professional who is able to hold up the mirror and hold you to your own self-justification. So having intellectual knowledge about what BPD is not the same as having recovery. So having said that, I hope that you are in therapy. I hope you're in group therapy, because that's also extremely important. When you have a group, the way that group therapy works, again, this is good for codependents as well. I'm in group therapy. I've been in group therapy for over 25 years. And the reason why I do it is because you don't know when you're being stimulated off in whatever your crazy narcissism is, and codependents are narcissistic also. You don't know when you are. When you make perfect sense when you say it, and in fact, because I'm smart and I have a lot of knowledge of psychology, I'm able to psychoanalyze the hell, as you can tell, of people. So imagine me being in group therapy as I'm psychoanalyzing somebody. And then what ends up happening is you have a group there. And the group will speak up and say, hey, Mike, here's where I got to call you on your crap here. And that's the most helpful for me. So for somebody who's extremely intelligent, in fact, quiet borderlines are usually more intelligent because it takes more intelligence and it takes more discipline and will to take all of that BPD rage and turn it inward, and then create all this intellectual justification for why you're then going to either ghost somebody or destroy somebody, and then you'll take on this sort of victim mentality, which could be happening here. It's one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, but if that's what's best for her, again, I have no idea if that's true or if that's your BPD justification of devaluing and destroying and discarding somebody. And if you're a borderline, you're not going to know, especially if you're a borderline that's not in any real recovery. So recovery isn't about learning psychology. Recovery is about getting honest about what you do, why you do it, and having some system there that will call you on your bullshit, call you out of your narcissistic self-justification and denial. I'm not saying that's the case with you. I just can't tell by the way that you've described it. All right, he goes on to say, I will say quiet BPD people are the wackiest, and since I am one, I think it's because of this overwhelming sense of loneliness and worthlessness, which is the case for narcissists and for loud borderlines and for codependents. So that's nothing unusual, but that's right. That is, I would agree that that's part of it. But the bit of worth we get from others keeps that mask on. Either that or we don't want to hurt people. At least I don't in my case. None of them do. So if your argument is that I have quiet BPD, I'm different, I don't want to hurt people. Loud borderlines don't want to hurt people either. All borderlines are the same in that they mean what they say. When they love bomb you, they mean it. When they say you're the one for me, you're my favorite person. Mine would even say almost those exact words. She'd say you're the best because you do all the things, meaning I was her favorite person. They mean it when they say that, I'll never hurt you. I love you more than anything. They mean it. They also mean it when they say you're the worst person that ever existed, or you're extremely toxic to me. I can't have you around. You're trying to destroy me. Or you said this and you did that, and you go, no, I never said that. No, I remember. No, you did. You don't remember. That happened in your head. I didn't say that. They mean those things too. So the fact that you don't want to hurt people doesn't mean anything. I mean, I understand the feeling, but this is BPD. BPD is that this is what makes it a personality disorder. Because, look, the thing that makes BPD toxic to other people isn't the fact that you don't have feelings. It's not that, this stereotype of narcissism that people have, which is that narcissists have no feelings and they are these evil geniuses, and when we've been discarded and damaged and eviscerated by a borderline, quiet or otherwise, the only logical conclusion that we come to, because we still have this belief that you're rational, is that we say they're a narcissist. I thought they were a borderline, but now I see the whole time they were a narcissist. They must have planned it. The reason why we have this feeling that you must have planned it is because it is as if you've planned out how to find the most destructive way to lead us into feeling safe, to con us into feeling loved and safe and understood. And then when we are at our most vulnerable, because you have pulled it out of us, you have loved us, you have psychoanalyzed us, pulled out our deepest fears, and then allayed those fears and made us feel safe and loved. And then the next day, you will say the one thing that we have zero defense against. And it will be as if you planned it out the whole time. In fact, a true evil genius would not have been able to plan it out as well. And the reason is because this is all a projection. What borderlines feel is they have incredible self-hatred. They have no self-worth. In fact, they feel on an unconscious level that anybody who loves them must be destroyed. That true love, true vulnerability, which they feel, that's what they hate themselves for the most. They hate that part of themselves. They believe it is wrong. They deserve to be destroyed because of their deep feelings of need and vulnerability. So when they see it in you, which is what they will see after they have after they have idealized you and after they have gotten you to reveal your deepest, greatest vulnerability, that will stimulate in them the projection, and they will see themselves in you. And since they believe they deserve to be destroyed, they will feel that they must destroy you. This is all going on an unconscious level, of course. So this idea that we don't want to hurt people, of course you don't. That doesn't mean anything. The point is the difference, the thing that makes it, everybody has some level of this. It's not like borderlines are these alien creatures. Everybody has this to some degree, some more than others. And it can be taken right up to the level. Most codependents are like this, have different attachment styles and, fear of intimacy. That's why they seek out borderlines and narcissists, because there's no real intimacy that ever happens. And so it keeps them safe. So they'll take the abuse so that they can have the, week or two of bliss, so which will offset it, but they know it's, on an unconscious level, they know it's not real. And so there's nothing unusual about that. Borderlines are no different than others. They just have it. It's gone so far that it's in the level of a disorder. So, but the difference is that people who don't have a disorder have the ability to follow through. When they make a promise, they can follow through with it. When they make a commitment, they can follow through with it. If they tell you one day, I love you and I'm going to be there with you throughout whatever, they may wake up the next day and have fears and all kinds of other things, but they have the ability to follow through. They have the ability to at least to some degree, to override their impulses. Borderlines don't. When that impulse strikes them, they don't have the ability to overcome it. So again, the whole borderline argument of I'm not a narcissist, I have empathy. Empathy is meaningless if it doesn't have consistency. You can have empathy for a month, but then if that empathy disappears one day, a month later, and you become psychopathic, or you become a quiet borderline and you ghost, or you come out with a note and you say very calmly without any emotion about why I can never be with you because you're actually very toxic for me and you're destroying my ability to live my life, it doesn't matter. That empathy is gone. It's the fact that the empathy disappears. That's what makes borderlines so destructive. And when that empathy disappears, it's not like you have saved up in the bank. Well, but I've got a whole 4 months or 2 months or 1 month of I was empathetic and loving for 2 months, so I have a credit, and I haven't lost my empathy score. It's just gone down a little bit. No, when you lose empathy, you lose it. It's gone. When you lose empathy to the point that you act out psychopathically, whether you have a smile on your face or whether you're screaming and throwing knives at somebody, that completely erases whatever empathy you had, which is why the only conclusion that partners come to is that they must be a narcissist. And that is also why, at least as I've heard from some, that borderline personality disorder is simply a form of narcissistic personality disorder, because borderline personality disorder is covert narcissism. It's also called secondary psychopathy, which means the psychopath comes out. You can be a psychopath without losing your temper. So we don't want to hurt people, at least I don't in my case, until you do. And you can justify it. If you're that intelligent and you're a quiet borderline, if you are a borderline, it means that you do these things. It means that you are a secondary psychopath. You just don't scream and yell about it. You bide your time. Mine would bide her time. I remember watching her split once. When the final discard happened, there was one word, one phrase I used that she used for herself, and we laughed about it. And in a loving way, we were talking about how we were, and I threw out that one phrase that she used, and I saw the look on her face. So I saw her eyes change, and she goes, "Oh yeah," and then her whole body language changed, and within 10 minutes, She had found a reason for me to leave and said, I'll talk to you tomorrow and we're going to do this and we're going to do that, continuing to go on with the promises, probably trying to fight within herself, thinking that if she could just get me out of there, that she would be able to wrangle her, her psychopathy and her rage at me. But no, what ended up happening in the next 12 hours is that she ended up writing this note, completely destroying and devaluing me. That's what a quiet borderline does. So it might be even worse. You're so intelligent, you're so smart, you're so quiet, you're able to psychopathically destroy your partner, but you do it what are you talking about? I never lost my temper. Why are you getting so mad at me? Why are you so hurt? I don't know you to know whether or not that's the case. I just know that what you're saying doesn't seem to indicate that you have complete understanding. Maybe I'm wrong. Either that or we don't want to hurt people, at least I don't in my case. And he says, Jungian psychology, I think, should be mandatory for many people with BPD. I can't comment on that. I love Jungian psychology, so maybe that's great. He says, I'm learning to balance my darker parts with my lighter parts. If what that means is that you are able to tolerate your psychopathic rage and not act on it, and you're able to act opposite, which is different than bullshitting somebody. So a quiet borderline will bullshit you when they are full of rage and they want to destroy you. They can't tolerate the guilt of being an angry person, so they will pretend that they're not upset. But that's different. Lying isn't the same as having awareness that, oh, I am splitting right now. This is my secondary psychopathy coming out, and I need to do something different. I've heard some borderlines say in recovery, they'll tell their partner, I need you to leave the house for 6 hours. Because they know if the person's around, they may act out on their psychopathy. They're aware of it, then they go and they do whatever work they need to do to self-soothe and get through that so that they don't act out. And even then, they still act out. And don't even remember it lots of times. So again, I'm not hearing any real recovery. I'm hearing potentially using psychology as a way to, it's not effective, bottom line. Let's see. I think Jungian psychology should be mandatory for many people with BPD. I'm learning to balance my darker parts with my lighter parts. I can be an ass when needed, but never to my girl. I don't know what that means. This is the healthiest relationship I've had, past tense. Communication was amazing for the most part. Of course, we're young and anxious and emotional, so we aren't perfect with it, but no one is. I don't know what that means either. That could be true about any relationship, but I've heard borderlines talk about that. They talk about their extreme psychotic behavior, and then they say, but everybody has problems, and everybody has fears, and like mine says, all relationships, everybody breaks up with people, and all partners fight, but that's not what's happening with a borderline and a non-borderline. So I don't know, what you're saying might be true, but it could be just you either without awareness, or you could be justifying some very destructive borderline behavior. I don't know. Don't have enough information. I will say we never yelled at each other. Meaningless. My borderline never yelled at me, not once. And yet it was the worst devaluation I've ever experienced. I don't think I've ever shamed her outwardly the way you describe. If you're a borderline, you did. You have to. Unless you've been in therapy for 10 years or more, and you are able to know your symptoms, and you are able to act contrary to your conscious awareness of your symptoms, like you're deeply conscious, like you feel, she just said this, and I'm realizing that even though what my brain is telling me is that she's out to get me, what's really happening is that she just did the most loving thing anybody could have done. And it's so frightening to me that I only know how to destroy it because I can't tolerate being loved, because I hate myself and I think I'm unworthy of love. And so instead of acting out, I am going to do the opposite, or I'm going to say, honey, I need to be alone for a couple of hours. Can you please leave the house? That is a sign of awareness. You haven't shown me that you have full awareness yet. Don't get me wrong. You're on your path. You're doing your work. Keep doing it. Maybe I don't have all the information, but there's some serious signs here that you're not as aware as you might think. So it's great. That's the healthiest relationship, again, you've had. And bear in mind, you're breaking up with her. So something ain't right. So if you were saying, I'm in this relationship with my girlfriend and we're planning on getting married, it's the best relationship I've ever had. I sometimes do this and I sometimes do that, but we always work through it. You're not saying that. You said, we're breaking up, and then you gave a reason that means nothing. I have no idea what the emotional scenario is. And now you're talking in the past tense. But the fact is, you're breaking up. Do you see the disconnect here? It may have been the healthiest relationship you've had, but why isn't it? If it was so healthy, why aren't you still together? Communication was amazing for the most part. My borderline was amazing at communication until she wasn't. I don't think I've ever shamed her outwardly the way you describe. Shaming her inwardly, outwardly, it doesn't matter. You ghosted her, you devalued her, you disappeared on her, you very calmly, psychopathically eviscerated her, whatever. If you're a borderline, these are things that you did. If you didn't do these things, then I don't think you're a borderline, because that's the definition of borderline. Borderline personality disorder is a description of symptoms. And that's how you know if somebody has BPD. You see if they exhibit these symptoms. In fact, they've said a lot of times, you're no longer a borderline because you're not exhibiting, symptoms 3 and 4. It doesn't take away the internal craziness. Lots of times they're still very destructive. Having all, again, it's the symptoms. If you're able to really, truly act contrary to the symptoms, regardless of what's going on inside, then you can say, I'm not a borderline. But if you are a borderline, it means that you do those things, or you wouldn't be a borderline. It just seems like something I would never want to do to her. And that's no different than any other borderline. They never want to destroy their partner until they do. For me, it would be I would repress how I feel and what I think so she could feel heard, and then resentment would grow, which created a festering background feeling of annoyance until I just opened up about how I felt, and I would be everywhere. So that is very borderline. Borderline personality disorder, is you get so wrapped up in your narcissism and your feelings. And of course, what makes it a personality disorder is that your feelings are not associated with objective reality. This kind of stuff happened with me. We're out having a really great dinner at a restaurant, and I look at my watch, and then the next thing I know, she has to leave, and I'm like, why? And she says, because I know you don't want to be here with me. What are you talking about? I saw what you did. What did I do? You looked at your watch. You couldn't stand being here with me. And then when I looked at you and I said thus and such, I saw this look on your face. And by the way, that other woman walked behind you and you glanced at her ass, and I know that you wished that you were with her. I can't take this anymore. And then, throws her drink and walks out. There's no reality to any of it. I was looking at my watch because I was wanting to know what time it was, because my plan was I was going to take her back to my place and have her watch her favorite show. So I was thinking about her. So everything she said was completely totally happening inside of her, and it was completely divorced from objective reality. Her feelings are real, they're just not accurate to the objective reality. So what you're describing is quiet borderline devaluation. I'll read it again. I don't think I've ever shamed her outwardly the way you describe. Well, you didn't do it immediately. That's borderline. That's quiet. Quiet borderlines are they split and then they repress it. But as you say, it just builds up in strength and then it'll come out. It'll come out in a passive-aggressive way. It'll come out in an aggressive way. But it'll come out. That's the point. You don't have the ability to do what the rest of human beings can do because they have the same thing. Somebody says something, it pushes a button, and we learn to go, and we repress it, and then we think about it and we go, wait a minute, that was just my nonsense. I'm not going to say this to her. She's never done that to me. And then we do the opposite. You don't have the ability to do that if you're a borderline. And let me just read it. All those who have been in a relationship with a quiet borderline are nodding their heads as you describe exactly what happens. And it's incredibly destructive. So this idea, you're still under this delusion that your repressing of it somehow takes away the damage. It just delays it. Doesn't dissipate it at all. In fact, it makes it worse because you will have found some very intellectualized way to say it without any negative feelings, maybe intense feelings, which is even worse. It's even more unconscious, if there's such a thing as worse. I don't think I've ever shamed her outwardly the way you described. That just seems like something I would never want to do to her until you do. For me, it would be I repress how I feel, extremely self-destructive, and what I think so she could feel heard. So you lie to her. So you're lying to her. You're making her feel heard by what? By not interrupting her and yelling at her in mid-sentence because she said something that pushed your button. So that's quiet BPD. You don't have to be in therapy. Quiet borderlines know that. They've been shamed out of their negative feelings and their anger, or they've learned how to survive by not exploding immediately. But the internal explosion never goes away. As you say, it just builds up. It turns into resentment. So much so that just the look of her makes you full of rage. It's the exact same thing. You just postponed it. Instead of having the dynamite explode immediately for no reason, you put a timer on it. And so it exploded later, and it exploded in a different way. Instead of an explosion that tears people's face off, it turns out to be this release of radon gas that slowly gets in there and suffocates them until they die. It doesn't matter. They still end up dead. So this doesn't tell me that you have any real deep conscious awareness of your symptoms. And it doesn't tell me that you have any real control over your symptoms. You're still controlled by them. You're just a quiet borderline. It would be, I repress how I feel and what I think so she could feel heard. You lie to her, makes her feel safe. And she's not. That's the point. She's not safe. You're making her feel safe, but she's not safe because you're going to give it to her later. And then resentment would grow, of course. And resentment would grow, which created a festering background feeling of annoyance. Annoyance is another way of saying horrific hatred, but you tone it down. This is a very British thing. You know, when a British person says, "I hate you, you motherfucker," instead of saying that, a British person will say, "I must say, I'm feeling rather annoyed at you at the moment." It's the same thing. You're just, you're minimizing your actual feelings. You're lying again. It would Resentment would grow, which created a festering background feeling of annoyance until I just opened up about how I felt. You mean until I just exploded with this feeling I've been holding on to? And again, opening up about how I felt, even if it's completely unjustified, connected to objective reality. See, there's a difference between somebody, you were out at dinner and if, let's say, same scenario, me looking at my watch going, okay, so another 20 minutes and her favorite show is on and I can't wait to take her back and, give her, a bowl of ice cream and sit her in front of the TV and make her happy. That's different from, sorry, what were you saying? That's what she thinks I did, but I didn't. But if I had done that, then somebody says, wow, I just have to tell you, when we were at dinner, it just really seemed like you weren't interested, and that hurt my feelings. That's opening up about your feelings, not what you've said, which is she looks at her watch and then smiles at you, and then you decide she hates your guts, and you get this feeling, and the feeling grows, and then you become outraged and full of anger, and then you just have to share your feelings, which isn't taking acknowledgement of your feelings. It's bushwhacking her hours or days later about something she never did or said, and then when she says, I never felt like that, and then you continue to devalue her and accuse her of thoughts and feelings she never had, you're just saying, but I'm just sharing my feelings. But there's no awareness that your feelings are not connected to objective reality. And there's no responsibility, because sharing your feelings assumes that you are taking responsibility for them. And that's not what borderlines do. When they erupt, they're not taking responsibility for their feelings. Their infantile, narcissistic need to express their feelings at your expense at all cost is what's happening here. So you don't know when it's obvious. Something happens, you have a feeling, you deny it, you repress it, you lie to them by saying, I want you to feel heard. But what's really happening is that you're nodding your head while inside you're going, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. And then that grows and grows and grows until when it's not appropriate, when contextually there's no connection, and you're in the grocery store a day later and you just have to say, I just have to tell you what you did the other day. You're like, wait, what? That's what I hear you describing there. And you're minimizing it in such a way to make it sound like it's not incredibly destructive, which it actually is. Until I just opened up about how I felt, and I would be everywhere. And she's very empathetic, so she'd feel what I feel, and I felt like I was dragging her down. So I don't know what any of that means. Empathetic can mean codependent, which means that instead of saying to you, hey, I never said that, I never felt that, what's happening is completely within you, which of course, if you're a good borderline, you're going to go, don't gaslight me out of my feelings. So she's afraid that you're going to do that. So she knuckles under and she takes responsibility for something she didn't do, she didn't say, she didn't think. And then she feels more unsafe because now she knows that no matter what she does or says, you're going to take it the wrong way at some point and accuse her of doing something she didn't do or didn't think or didn't say. And the way you describe it is that she's empathetic. So, if she wasn't codependent, like I said, she would go, listen, I didn't do that. And I'm not going to take that on. But she takes it on, which means she's a codependent, right? And she'd feel what I feel and felt like I was dragging her down. Well, it's possible you were. Again, I want to make clear, most of what I was feeling and talked about didn't have much to do with her. That's what I'm saying. But she felt my emptiness and depression anyway. So that's not, by the way, that's not empathy. Feeling your emptiness and depression sounds like she takes it on, which is exactly what the codependent does in the relationship with the borderline. And that's, by the way, the unconscious strategy of the disorder. The strategy of the borderline disorder is, if I can just offset my discomfort and put it on you, then I won't have it. The codependent knows this is the strategy, and the codependent, because it is a contractual relationship, meaning that the only reason you love me is because I do what needs to be done for you to accept me, that I'm not worthy to be loved in and of myself. What I need to do is just find out what it is you want me to do so that you'll keep me around. She goes, oh, I'm going to take it on. You're right. I did do that to you. And then she tries to take on your emotional dysfunction so that you will feel better, in the hopes that she will then be a good person and you will love her. Of course, that's not how it works, ever. She's very, I'm going to replace empathetic with codependent. She's very codependent, so she would unnecessarily feel what I feel, and I felt like I was dragging her down, which you may have been. Again, I want to make clear that most of what I was feeling, talked about, didn't have much to do with her. It didn't have anything to do with her. But she took on my emptiness unnecessarily and my depression anyway, even though that was very self-destructive of her, because she thought that's what she needed to do to keep you loving her. Then I felt I couldn't speak up. So now you're going to hold that against her. So you need to speak up, right? You need to release every time you feel, your borderline craziness comes up, forgive the word, but when she doesn't do something and you think that she's thought something horrible about you, you want to blame her for it and attack her for it, which you're describing as speaking up. And then I feel like I can't speak up, which then creates more resentment, more guilt, which is anger turned inward. Instead of taking that anger out on her, which would be destructive, that would be not quiet borderline, you put it inward, but it doesn't change. You're still full of rage at her for something she didn't do, and you can't tell the difference. And so holding it in makes it even worse, right? That's what you're going to say in a second, I bet. Then I felt like I couldn't speak up. That was frustrating. But I understand I need to find a way to process emotions within myself. It just seems impossible sometimes. That's because you have a disorder. So what most non-disordered people are able to do, you aren't at this point. That's why it's a disorder. And I'm with you on that. Like, the way I feel is the only thing that ever was, that is, and ever will be. Right. It's consuming and it feels like there's no way out. Right. Maybe I leaned too much on her. Maybe I was too vulnerable, and the emotions and trauma I held in so long helped push her away from me to stay here. So you're telling me you pushed her away. You're telling me that she's breaking up with you because of your BPD. It's got nothing to do with your careers going in different directions. It's that she's trying to be nice. I think that if she were more honest with you, I think it would be healthier for you. I think the honest thing for her to say would be, this is a really destructive relationship and your BPD is destructive to me. I love you, but I can't be in a relationship with you. So I hope you get some help, and I wish you all the best. I'm going to move on with my life. That would be the kind thing to say, because then you would be more inclined to go maybe get some therapy instead of just going to get your psych degree. Assuming that you're not in therapy, I don't know. She swears it has nothing to do with me and is all fucked up about it because she's codependent and she can't, So now I know she's breaking up with you. But I can't help but to feel I pushed her away, that I somehow, some way manifested this because I'm not worthy. No, you somehow, some way manifested it because of your dysfunctional symptoms. It has nothing to do with your worth. You obviously have tons of worth, or she wouldn't have fallen in love with you. This is the thing, borderlines, I wish, I could have explained to my borderline. If you could just learn how to deal with your symptoms that aren't destructive, I would have stayed with her. Because borderlines, when they're not flipped out, they really are really loving. They're really empathetic. They really can be extremely flexible and understanding and really nurturing and loving until they're not. And when I say until they're not, it means that when their symptoms kick in. So if you could learn how to process, it's not your feelings, it's how you react to them. That's the only thing that needs to change. Then you would be able to go to your borderline, my borderline, instead of flipping out and saying, I had a dream last night and I was afraid and you did this and that, and so I can't trust you. Or when you said that one thing that really threw me off, I realized that you're out to get me and you're going to destroy me. And then one time she said, I know what you've been doing. And I'm like, what have I been doing? You've been planning this all along. And I'm like, oh, really? I bought you a $4,000 computer because I'm trying to destroy you, right? So if she had the ability to really know what her feelings were, to accept them within herself, and then she could say, I'm starting to flip out right now. I'm starting to feel a split coming on, or when you said this, I was really frightened. And then you accept when you say, but that's not what I meant. Oh, really? You love me? Yeah, I do love you. Instead of flipping out, you say, I'm starting to feel really frightened right now. Can you hold me? But borderlines are incapable of that, because if a borderline says, I'm feeling really frightened right now, can you hold me? If I go to hold you, the intimacy of holding you then will stimulate your fear of enmeshment. And then you'll act out on that. So I'm with you. You're aware that you have BPD. And I'm with you that you're trying to do everything. But I think what really needs to happen is, while you are getting your doctor of psychology, I think it would also be very helpful if you were in therapy with a therapist, in group therapy, and really trying to understand all this instead of where you're at now, which is you don't understand. I don't think you have a truly deep understanding, which can only come after years and years of intense therapy. That's why it's a disorder. You weren't too vulnerable at all. It was the opposite. And the emotions and trauma I held in so long pushed her away. It wouldn't have mattered if you held it in or didn't hold it in. Your response to your emotions are out of objective reality, and you respond to them destructively. So again, it's not about your feelings or your intensity. It's how you handle them. You can't make those feelings are never going to go away. No matter how much therapy you get, you're always going to have intense emotions. You're just going to have to learn how to respond to them differently. And you're going to have to learn to take responsibility for them. You haven't learned how to do that yet. And that's okay. It takes time. Because I'm too stupid to think someone would want to be with me long term. I guarantee you she wanted to be with you long term. She just couldn't. That I'm too crazy and damaged to be loved. You can be loved. You see, this is all projection, right? You see all that. None of that is anything. We don't care. Here's the thing. We don't care how damaged you are. We don't care that you've been damaged or abused. I mean, we care because we love you, but that doesn't drive us away. The only thing that drives us away is the splitting. Is when you act out aggressively or passive aggressively, in your case, against us for things we didn't say, didn't think, didn't do. And the damage of continuously being devalued, because that's what devaluation means, the damage that's done to us after being devalued over and over and over again makes it impossible for us to stay. And the ones that do stay are really messed up. So it means that she's fairly healthy and that she's breaking up with you because she's telling you it's got nothing to do with you, because she's too codependent to come out and say, no, your borderline personality disorder is too destructive for me. You should get help. Let's see what else. I worked so hard on myself and it really showed. I learned to manage myself better. Good, you made progress. Good for you. And who I was a bit more, but at the same time, I'm still very unstable in my emotions or sense of self. Regardless, I love her to death and always will, but now I have to refocus on who I am, finding what's been within me my whole life, but I can't seem to find. And you're not going to find that by getting a doctor of psychology. I guarantee you, you won't find it there. From a borderliner, he says, keep up the great work, and any borderliners who come on here and hate, I understand why they may be defensive, because you're exposing our deepest fears, but the main problem is many of us with BPD cannot admit this until we've either hit rock bottom or until it's too late. Best way to get through this is understanding and being real about it. Okay, good. So I think that's enough. So is Quiet Bpd kinder, gentler form? No, it is just as destructive. It doesn't matter if you scream while you're cutting somebody's guts out or if you're doing it with a smile on your face. It doesn't matter. The devaluation is the same. The destruction is the same. And again, people with BPD, as you say, are unaware. And they really are. And it's not their fault. They can't help it. That's what therapy is for. So 10 years of therapy, I recommend, and I'm not an expert, but I recommend regular therapy in whatever style of therapy works for you, figure it out. Group therapy, which will help you with learning how to express your feelings constructively, which right now I don't think you do. You need to express your feelings, but you're probably not doing it in a healthy way or in a constructive way or in a way that gives us the ability to help you. And so regular therapy, group therapy, and then those workbooks, daily workbooks, working through your every single day. I think that's the best way out, but that's just my opinion. I'm not a borderline. I don't know what you need. For those of you who've been with what I just described, you're never going to get them to love you. It's not going to happen the way that you want. Even if they want to love you, they won't be able to if they're untreated. And if you get into treatment with them, it's possible. I've seen at least one example based on what I said. She went to therapy, group therapy, and did a workbook, and she was able to keep her relationship going, at least, for who knows how long. But more than likely, if you are with a borderline and you get them into therapy, you are going to slow down their progress, if not completely dwarf it, because they're not going to be, you're their fix. And they need to be able to be alone and self-soothe and self-regulate and learn how to act contrary to their symptoms. And that is usually done outside of a relationship. And because you're a codependent, you don't know how you need them to be screwed up in order to keep your codependence going. So the best thing you can do is get the hell out. So you want to heal, do the first two things, go no contact, work all 12 steps, especially step 4, and then do 3 and 4 when you can. That's it for me. I wish you guys all the best. See you next time.